The Boeing 737 leveled off at 30,000 feet, and the first-class cabin settled into that particular silence wealthy passengers paid extra for. Soft lighting, champagne flutes, the muted hum of pressurized air. The flight attendant, a woman named Gabrielle whose smile had been professionally calibrated over 6 years of service, moved down the aisle with practiced grace. Her eyes swept over the usual collection of business executives and tech entrepreneurs, landing finally on seat 2A. The man sitting there wore mud-caked boots. Actual mud, brown and crusted along the leather, flacking onto the pristine carpet. His hands were calloused, nails rimmed with dirt, and his flannel shirt looked like it had been pulled from a laundry pile that hadn't seen detergent in a week. Gabrielle's smile tightened. She'd seen this before. Sometimes people bought first-class tickets as a joke, a bucket list splurge without understanding the unspoken etiquette. She leaned down, voice honeyed but firm. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remove your boots or at least shake off the debris. We maintain certain standards in this cabin." The man looked up. His face was weathered, deep lines around pale blue eyes that seemed older than his apparent 50-something years. He didn't speak, just nodded slightly and reached down but not toward his boots. His hand went to his jacket pocket. Gabrielle straightened, ready to escalate if needed. Then it happened. A small leather bifold slipped from his lap as he shifted. It hit the armrest and fell open. For exactly 2 seconds Gabrielle saw it. The badge. Central Intelligence Agency. The eagle clutching arrows and an olive branch. The man's photo. A name she couldn't quite read upside down. Her breath caught. The man retrieved the wallet with unhurried movements, tucked it back into his jacket, and returned his attention to the window. He hadn't said a word. Gabrielle felt heat crawl up her neck. She mumbled something about bringing him a drink and retreated down the aisle, her composure fractured. But that wasn't the story. That was just the moment the world tilted. Because 3 rows back, in seat 5C, another passenger had seen the entire exchange. Captain Renata "Ghost" Kozlov, retired United States Air Force, call sign earned over the skis of contested airspace most people would never hear about. She sat with her tablet open, noise-canceling headphones resting around her neck, and she'd watched the whole thing with the quiet amusement of someone who'd spent 2 decades being underestimated. Renata knew what that badge meant. She also knew what those boots meant. Field operative. Recent deployment. The kind of mud that didn't come from Iowa farmland. She'd seen it in Kandahar, Ramadi, places where the earth was red and wet with things other than rain. Renata closed her tablet. This flight just got interesting. The man in 2A didn't order a drink when Gabrielle returned, flustered and overly apologetic. He waved her off with a tired hand and closed his eyes. Renata watched him from her peripheral vision, the way she'd been trained to observe without starring. Old habits. The kind that kept you alive when everyone around you was trying to figure out if you belonged in the cockpit or the galley. She dealt with her own share of Gabrielle's over the years. The flight attendants who asked if she was sure she was in the right seat. The gate agents who'd called for the captain over the intercom, then looked past her when she identified herself. The passengers who'd asked to speak to the real pilot. Renata had learned to let it slide off, mostly. But there was something about this particular moment, this particular man, that pulled her back into a memory she'd been avoiding for 3 months. The memory had a name. Call sign, Prophet. Real name, Major Elias Haim. Combat controller. The man who'd guided her through the worst night of her career. The night her F-16 took a surface-to-air missile over hostile territory and she'd had to punch out into darkness so complete it felt like drowning. Elias had been the voice in her ear, calm, precise, unwavering. "Ghost, I have you on thermals. 2 miles northeast of your position there's a dry riverbed. Move now, don't stop, don't think, just move." She'd moved. For 6 hours through terrain that wanted her dead, with Elias feeding her coordinates, threats, breathing patterns. He talked her through a panic attack at hour 4 when she'd hidden in a cave and felt the walls closing in. "Renata," he'd said, using her real name for the first time. "You've got a heartbeat. That means you've got a mission. Get home." She got home. 3 days later, a Black Hawk pulled her out of a goat farmer's shed 15 miles from friendly lines. Elias had coordinated the entire extraction. She never got to thank him properly. 2 months after that, she'd heard he'd rotated out, gone dark. Deep cover work, someone said, the kind you don't come back from the same. Now staring at the man in 2A, Renata wondered. She couldn't see his face clearly from this angle, but the posture was right, the stillness. Operators had a way of occupying space that was simultaneously present and absent, like they were always half in another world. The plane hit turbulence. Mild. The kind that made drinks slosh but didn't wake sleeping passengers. Gabrielle stumbled slightly in the aisle, caught herself on a seat back. The man in 2A didn't react, didn't even open his eyes. Renata noticed. Noticed the way his hands stayed loose on the armrests. No white knuckles, no tension. That wasn't farmer behavior. That was someone who'd flown through worse. Much worse. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, apologizing for the rough air, estimating another hour to Dallas-Fort Worth. Renata leaned back and let her eyes drift closed, but her mind was spinning. She'd retired 6 months ago. Honorable discharge, 20 years of service, 3 combat deployments, 400 hours over hostile airspace, and she'd spent the last 6 months trying to figure out what the hell to do with the rest of her life. Everyone said the same thing. You've got your whole life ahead of you. As if 42 was ancient, as if 2 decades in a cockpit translated to anything in the civilian world. She'd applied to commercial airlines, all of them, Delta, United, Southwest, American. The responses were polite, professional. We're going in a different direction. Your qualifications are impressive, but thank you for your interest. She knew what it was. They saw the call sign, Ghost. They saw the classified missions, the redacted sections of her service record. And they saw a woman who didn't fit their image of what a pilot should be. Too intense, too quiet, too much baggage. So she'd taken a job as a consultant, teaching drone operators at a private defense contractor outside Houston. It paid well. It was mind-numbingly boring. And every single day she missed the sky, missed the stick in her hand, the roar of the engine. The moment of transition when the ground fell away and there was nothing but you and the machine and the mission. She opened her eyes. The man in 2A was awake now, staring out the window at the cloud layer below. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. Renata made a decision. She unbuckled her seatbelt, stood, and walked forward. Gabrielle was in the galley, whispering urgently with another attendant. They both looked up as Renata passed. She didn't acknowledge them. She stopped at. The man turned his head slowly. Up close she could see the scars, one along his jawline, another disappearing into his hairline. His eyes were the color of winter sky, and they recognized her before she said a word. Elias, she said quietly. He blinked. Once. Then a slow smile cracked his weathered face. Ghost. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. A reunion spoken in call signs, because real names were for people who hadn't saved each other's lives in the dark. They didn't hug, didn't shake hands. Operators didn't do sentimentality well. Renata slid into the empty seat beside him, 2B, without asking. The passenger who'd originally booked it was in the bathroom. She'd move if they came back. You look like hell, she said. Elias laughed. It was a rough sound, underused. You look like retirement, she winced. He caught it. That bad, that obvious. I've been doing this a long time. I know what lost looks like. Renata glanced toward the galley. Gabrielle was still watching them, curiosity written all over her face. Your badge fell out. Flight attendant saw it. She was mortified. Elias shrugged. Happens. I'm not supposed to fly commercial, but someone screwed up my transport. Had to get to Fort Worth for a debrief. Last flight out was this one. What were you doing that got you that dirty? His expression closed. Not hostile, just gone. The same way hers used to shut down when someone asked about mission details at a cocktail party. Can't say, she nodded. She hadn't expected him to. There was a long silence, not uncomfortable. They'd shared worse silences over worse comms in worse situations. Finally, Elias spoke. I heard you punched out, heard you made it back, never got to say good work. You're the reason I made it back, you and that voice of yours. You did the walking. You did the talking, that's harder. He looked at her then, really looked. Why'd you retire? The question hit harder than she'd expected. Renata stared at her hands. Hands that used to grip a control stick with absolute certainty. Now they just felt empty. Got tired of proving I belonged, every single day. 20 years, Elias, 20 years of being the first woman in every room. of having my fitness reports scrutinized twice as hard, of listening to jokes in the ready room that stopped when I walked in. I did everything right. I flew better than most. I fought harder than all of them. And I still had to justify my existence every damn time I suited up. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then, I know, she looked at him sharply. You know. I've worked with a lot of pilots, male, female, good, bad. You were the best I ever guided. Hands down, no contest. And I watched you get passed over for promotion 3 times. I watched them give your missions to less qualified men. I watched you earn respect inch by inch while they handed it to others for free. Renata felt something crack in her chest, something she'd been holding tight for 6 months. Then why didn't anyone say that when it mattered? Elias met her eyes. Because the system's broken, and saying it wouldn't have fixed it, but you know what does fix it? What? Time. You walking away doesn't erase what you did. It becomes legend. Give it 5 years, 10. Your name will be the one they whisper in training. The pilot who punched out over hostile and walked herself home. The woman who flew missions no one else would take. Ghost, you don't need their validation anymore. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to, but the truth was messier. Retirement felt like failure, like giving up, like proving everyone right who'd ever said she didn't have what it took to last. I don't know who I am without the cockpit, she admitted. The words came out small. Elias nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. I've been out in the field so long, I don't know how to be a person anymore. I wear mud and flannel because it's easier than pretending I fit into a suit. I scare people at the grocery store because I clear corners by instinct. I can't sleep without noise because silence feels like ambush. He paused. But we're not broken, Ghost. We're just calibrated for war. And the world's not at war, not the way we fought it. So what do? We recalibrate or we find a new war. Renata laughed bitterly. There's always a new war. Not for us, not anymore. We paid our dues. The plane began its descent. The cabin lights brightened. Passengers stirred. Gabrielle appeared, asking them to return to their assigned seats for landing. Renata stood. Elias caught her wrist, gentle. His hand was rough, scarred, but the grip was steady. You've got my number, it's the same. Call me if you need a reminder that you're still Ghost. Still the best damn pilot I ever worked with. She nodded. Didn't trust her voice. She returned to 5C and buckled in. The ground rose up to meet them. Wheels touched tarmac. The plane shuddered. And for a moment Renata felt the ghost of the stick in her hand. The phantom sensation of flight. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Dallas-Fort Worth International sprawled below them like a circuit board, all lights and geometry. Renata deplaned ahead of Elias, disappearing into the stream of passengers flooding the terminal. She didn't look back. Old habit, forward momentum, always forward. She made it as far as the baggage claim before her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she answered. Kozlov. Ghost. Different voice. Younger, female, clipped and professional. This is Major Iris Lau, 15th Reconnaissance Squadron. I'm calling on behalf of Colonel Bridger. He'd like to speak with you. Are you available tomorrow at 0900? Renata's heart kicked. The 15th, drone reconnaissance, cutting edge, classified. She'd heard rumors they were developing something new, something that required pilots with combat experience and unconventional problem-solving skills. What's this about? He'll brief you in person. Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio. We'll arrange transport. This is an invitation, Captain, not an order. But the colonel was very specific. He wants you. Renata stood in the fluorescent wash of the baggage carousel, people eddying around her, and felt the first spark of something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. I'll be there. Outstanding. Someone will contact you with details within the hour. Welcome back, Ghost. The line went dead. Renata stared at her phone. Behind her, she heard a familiar voice. You look like you just got called back into the game. She turned. Elias stood there, a duffel bag over his shoulder, that same tired smile. How did you? I made a call 30 minutes ago to a friend who owes me. Told him there was a pilot rotting in civilian limbo who deserved better. Gave him your name, your call sign, your record. He made some inquiries. Apparently they've been trying to find you for 2 months, but you moved and didn't update your contact info with the VA. Renata stared at him. You got me a job. I got you a meeting. The job's yours if you want it, but yeah, I made the introduction. She didn't know what to say. Elias stepped closer. You saved yourself that night, Ghost. I just gave you directions. This is the same thing. I'm just pointing you toward the runway. You've still got to fly. He turned and walked away, disappeared into the crowd. Renata stood there, pulse thrumming, feeling the weight of the sky pressing down on her shoulders in the best possible way. The next morning, a black SUV picked her up from her apartment at 0600. The driver was Air Force. Didn't speak beyond confirming her identity. They drove south through flat Texas landscape, the sun rising red and violent over scrubland. Renata watched the world pass and felt herself slipping back into the rhythm, the readiness. By the time they reached Lackland, she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. The base looked the same as every base she'd ever served on. Concrete, chain link, flags snapping in the wind. The SUV delivered her to a nondescript building near the flight line. Inside, the air was cold and sharp with the smell of jet fuel and electronics. Major Lau met her in the lobby. She was petite Asian American, maybe 30, with eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Kozlov, good to meet you. The colonel's ready." They walked through hallways lined with photos of aircraft, F-22s, B-2s, and then, toward the end, something Renata didn't recognize: a drone. But not like any drone she'd seen. Sleek, predatory, larger than a Reaper, smaller than a manned fighter. The plaque beneath it read XQ-47 Wraith, autonomous multi-role strike platform. Major Lau caught her staring. "That's what you're here for." Colonel Bridger was a man in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that came from leading men into bad situations and bringing them home. He stood when Renata entered, shook her hand firmly. "Captain Kozlov, Ghost. Thank you for coming, sir. Sit, please. Coffee." "Black, thank you, sir." They settled across from each other. Bridger slid a folder across the table, classified, eyes only. Renata opened it. Inside were technical specs, mission profiles, and a single photograph of a pilot in a flight suit, helmet under one arm, standing in front of the Wraith. The pilot was a woman. The name stenciled on the suit read Kozlov. Renata looked up. Bridger smiled. "We want you to test it. The Wraith is semi-autonomous. It can fly itself, but it needs a shepherd, someone with instincts, someone who can think like the enemy and respond before the AI catches up. We've tested it with a dozen pilots. Good pilots, but they all flew it like a drone. We need someone who will fly it like a fighter, someone who understands that machines are only as good as the human behind them." Renata's hands shook. She flattened them on the table. "Why me?" "Because you're Ghost. Because you survived when you shouldn't have. Because you think different. And because, frankly, Captain, you're the best we've got." The first flight was scheduled for 2 days later. Renata spent the intervening time in briefings: technical, tactical, medical. They ran her through physicals and psych evals, testing reflexes and stress responses. She passed everything, of course she did. On the morning of the flight, she suited up in a new flight suit, custom fitted, her call sign stitched over the heart: Ghost. It felt like coming home. The Wraith sat on the tarmac, gleaming in the early light. Renata circled it slowly, running her hands over the airframe. Carbon composite, whisper-quiet engines, sensor arrays she'd need weeks to fully understand. Major Lau appeared at her side. "Nervous? Excited? Good. The Wraith responds to confidence. Hesitate and it'll overrule you. Commit and it'll follow you into hell." Renata smiled. "Hell's where I do my best work." She climbed into the cockpit. Not a traditional cockpit. This was a hybrid. Seated position like a fighter, but surrounded by touchscreens and holographic displays. The stick was there. Thank God, she needed the stick. She ran through pre-flight. Systems green. Engines online. Comms check. "Ghost, this is Tower. You are cleared for taxi. Winds 270 at 8 knots. Altimeter 3012. Runway 29er left. You have the deck." Renata's hands moved automatically. Throttle up. The Wraith rolled forward, smooth and responsive. She taxied to the runway, feeling the machine under her. It was different, lighter, more eager. She toggled the comms. "Tower, Ghost, ready for departure." "Ghost, you are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." She pushed the throttles forward. The Wraith leapt, not like a fighter, faster, more aggressive. The acceleration pressed her into the seat. The runway blurred, rotate. The nose lifted. And then she was airborne. The ground fell away. The sky opened up. And for the first time in 6 months, Renata Kozlov felt whole. She climbed hard, punching through scattered clouds, the Wraith responding to her inputs with perfect synchronicity. The AI fed her data, airspeed, altitude, fuel, threats, but it stayed quiet, waiting, watching. She leveled off at 20,000 feet and took a breath. Below, Texas stretched out like a map, endless, beautiful, dangerous in its emptiness. Ghost Tower, how's she handling? Renata grinned. Like she's been waiting for me. Colonel Bridger's voice cut in. Good, now let's see what you can do. Proceed to Waypoint Alpha. Bogey simulation inbound. You're cleared to engage. The mission had begun. The bogey appeared on her HUD as a red diamond, 40 miles out and closing fast. Simulated enemy fighter. AI-controlled, programmed to mimic advanced adversary tactics. Renata's pulse steadied into that familiar combat rhythm. Slow, controlled. She banked left, bleeding altitude, positioning herself below the bogey's radar horizon. The Wraith's stealth profile was good but not perfect. She needed angles, needed surprise. Ghost, Bandit is at your 12 o'clock, 30 miles, Angels 2-5. Radar lock. Renata didn't respond. She was already moving. She dove hard and fast, pulling the Wraith into a split-S maneuver that would have grayed out a less experienced pilot. The AI chimed a warning, excessive G-force, but she overrode it. She knew her limits, knew the machines. The bogey tracked her, adjusting course. Good AI, aggressive. Renata smiled. She rolled inverted and pulled through, coming up behind and below the Bandit's projected flight path. Classic OODA loop. Observe. Orient. Decide. Act. Faster than the enemy. Her HUD lit up. Firing solution acquired. She squeezed the trigger, simulated missile away. The computer confirmed a hit. Splash 1, she reported. Ghost Tower, Bandit neutralized. Time from initial contact to splash, 48 seconds. That's a squadron record. Renata exhaled. 48 seconds. She'd done it in 37 once over the Straits of Hormuz, but that was in a Viper with a full weapons load and no AI second-guessing her. Our requesting clearance for low-level flight. I want to see what she can do in the weeds. There was a pause. Then Colonel Bridger approved, stay within the range boundaries, and Ghost, don't break my airplane. No promises, sir. She nosed down. The Wraith dropped like a stone, engines howling. 10,000 feet, 5-2. She leveled off at 500 feet above the desert floor, the landscape screaming past at just under Mach 1. The AI was screaming too. Proximity warnings, terrain alerts. She muted them. This was where instinct lived, where pilots separated from programmers. She threaded through a narrow canyon, wingtips clearing rock walls by meters. The Wraith handled like a dream, responsive, alive. She pulled up hard, climbing vertical, then rolled into a barrel roll at the apex. For a moment she was upside down, looking at the earth above her, and she laughed. Pure, unfiltered joy. The debrief lasted 3 hours. Colonel Bridger walked her through every second of the flight, analyzing decisions, responses, outcomes. Major Lau took notes. Other officers filtered in and out, watching the footage, asking questions. Renata answered everything, honest, direct, no ego, just facts. At the end, Bridger leaned back and smiled. You made that airplane do things it's not supposed to do. Respectfully, sir, it's designed to do those things. It just needed a pilot willing to push it. And you're willing. I've been waiting for a reason to push something again. This is it. Bridger nodded. He stood, extended his hand. Welcome back to active duty, Captain. Effective immediately, you're assigned to the Wraith Development Program. Code name Nightfall, your call sign stands. You'll be working with a small team, all vetted, all experienced, and all very interested in what you just did up there. Renata shook his hand. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. This program's experimental. Dangerous. And if it works, you'll be training the next generation of pilots to fly machines that might replace them. You comfortable with that? She considered. If we don't do it, someone else will. I'd rather it be us. Good answer. She left the building at sunset. The flight line was quiet, the Wraith secured in its hangar. Renata stood on the tarmac, watching the sky fade from blue to orange to deep purple. She pulled out her phone, typed a message to the only number that mattered. Flying again. You were right, thank you. 3 dots appeared, then, never doubted you, Ghost, she smiled, pocketed the phone, turned toward her quarters. She had work to do, a machine to master, a program to prove, and a sky that was finally hers again. The world had tried to tell her she was done, that she'd peaked. That retirement was the end, but Ghost wasn't finished. She was just getting started. And this time she wasn't flying alone. She had the Wraith, she had Nightfall. And she had something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The kind that tasted like jet fuel and adrenaline. The kind that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with flying in the first place. Not for the glory, not for the recognition, but for the moment when the ground fell away and there was nothing but sky and speed and the absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. 6 weeks into the program, Renata had logged over 100 hours in the Wraith. She knew its quirks, the way it pulled slightly left at high altitude, the delay in the throttle response during rapid deceleration, the sweet spot in the control stick where the AI and her inputs harmonized perfectly. She'd also met her team. Lieutenant Jacobs, fresh out of flight school, hungry and talented. Captain Os, a former Raptor driver with more combat hours than anyone under 40. And Commander Sarah Vance, Navy, a test pilot who'd flown every experimental aircraft the Pentagon had dreamed up in the last decade. They were good, but Renata was better, and they knew it. Not because she lorded it over them, but because when the missions got hard, and they always got hard, Renata was the one who figured it out first. The one who saw the solution 3 moves ahead. The one who made it look easy. Coulson Ghost wasn't just a name. It was a reputation. They ran simulations. Air-to-air, air-to-ground, SCAD missions, close air support, every scenario the think tanks could devise, and Renata flew them all. Sometimes she won. Sometimes she learned, but she never quit. On a Tuesday in late spring, Colonel Bridger called her into his office. Alone, that was unusual. Renata entered, closed the door. "Sir," Bridger gestured to a chair. His expression was serious. "We've got a situation, real world, not a drill." Renata sat. "I'm listening. There's a high-value target. Deep in hostile territory, Syria, Russian air defense network, S-400 batteries, electronic warfare platforms, no-fly zone in every practical sense. Traditional strikes are off the table, too risky, too visible, but we have intelligence that this target is moving in 72 hours. After that, we lose him. And you want Wraith? We want you. The Wraith stealth profile gives us a chance, but it's never been tested in a real combat environment, never faced live SAMs. Never had to deal with hostile jamming. This is a one-shot deal. If it works, it changes everything. If it fails..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Renata understood this was the test, the real one, not simulations, not training, actual war. Who else knows? Joint Chiefs, Secretary of Defense, the President, and now you. You have 24 hours to decide. If you say no, no judgment, no consequences. We'll find another way. But if you say yes, your wheels up in 48 hours. Renata didn't hesitate. "I'm in." Bridger studied her. "You're sure?" "I've been training for this my entire career, sir. I'm not backing out now." The mission brief was held in a SCIF, sensitive compartmented information facility, buried 2 levels below the main building. Renata, Bridger, Major Lau, and a handful of intelligence analysts crowded around a table covered in maps and satellite imagery. The target was a man named Volkov, Russian military intelligence, GRU, high-ranking, responsible for coordinating attacks on coalition forces and destabilizing operations across the Middle East. The intel said he'd be at a compound outside Aleppo for exactly 6 hours. One window, one chance. "The compound's here," Major Lau said, tapping the map. "Surrounded by civilian infrastructure, school, mosque, residential buildings. Collateral damage is unacceptable. The strike has to be surgical." Renata studied the imagery. The compound was small, walled, 2 buildings, minimal security presence visible, but that didn't mean it wasn't defended. Air defense. S-400 battery 15 miles west. Effective range covers the target area. Panzer systems closer in, and we're assuming electronic warfare assets. They'll try to jam your comms and sensor feeds. Can Wraith handle it? In theory, stealth profile should get you in and out without detection, but if they do acquire you, the S-400 will fire, and at that point it's a dogfight you can't win. Renata nodded. Ordnance. 2 GBU-53s, small diameter bombs. GPS-guided, precision within 3 meters. You'll have 1 pass, make it count. Rules of engagement. Positive ID on Volkov before you release. No civilian casualties. If you can't confirm, you abort. "And if I abort," Bridger answered, Then we lose him and people die, different people, coalition soldiers, civilians in other cities. This man's been killing with impunity for 5 years. This is our shot. Renata met his eyes. I'll get it done. The room exhaled. Major Lau handed her a tablet. Flight plans loaded. You'll launch from Incirlik. Low-level ingress across the Turkish border. Total flight time 2 hours 40 minutes. Loiter time over target 8 minutes. That's your window. After that, fuel becomes critical. What about extraction? Same route, fast and low. Turkish F-16s will be on standby at the border in case you need cover, but the whole point is that you don't. Ghost in, ghost out. Renata smiled faintly at the unintentional pun. Understood. The briefing ended. Renata returned to her quarters and packed, light, essentials only. She'd learned a long time ago not to carry more than you could run with. She slept 4 hours, dreamless, combat sleep. The flight to Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey took 6 hours. Renata spent it reviewing the mission, running mental rehearsals, visualizing every step. Landing, taxi, takeoff, ingress, target acquisition, release, egress, simple, except nothing was ever simple. At Incirlik, the Wraith was waiting. It had been transported ahead, reassembled by a specialized ground crew who asked no questions and made no eye contact. Renata suited up in silence. Major Lau was there, watching. You good? Renata nodded. I'm good. No second thoughts, plenty, but I'm still good. Lau handed her a small object, a patch, the Nightfall program insignia, a black silhouette of the Wraith against a crescent moon, for luck. Renata tucked it into her pocket. Thanks. Bring her back, Ghost. That's the plan. She walked out to the flight line. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The Wraith looked like a predator crouched and waiting. Renata ran her pre-flight, everything checked. Engines. Avionics, weapons. She climbed in, strapped down, closed the canopy, the cockpit sealed with a pressurized hiss. For a moment she sat in the silence, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. Then she toggled comms. Tower, Ghost, ready for departure. Ghost Tower, you are cleared, winds calm, altimeter 29907, runway 23, good hunting. She taxied. The Wraith moved like a shadow. At the end of the runway she paused, ran her final checks, then pushed the throttles forward. The Wraith surged, the runway blurred, rotate, lift off, the ground fell away. Renata climbed into the twilight, heading east toward the border, toward the target, toward the moment that would define everything. Below, the lights of Turkey gave way to darkness, the no-man's land between nations, the place where wars were fought in silence and shadows. Renata dropped to low altitude, 200 feet. The terrain screamed past. She flew without lights, without radar, guided only by GPS and the faint glow of her instruments. The border crossed beneath her. No fanfare, just a line on a map that meant everything. She was in Syrian airspace, hostile territory. The mission had begun. Her HUD displayed the route. 30 minutes to target. She settled into the rhythm, breathing, scanning, thinking 3 steps ahead. 20 minutes in, the first threat appeared. A radar ping, brief, searching. The S-400 battery sweeping the sky, the Wraith stealth held. The ping passed over her without locking, but it was close. Renata adjusted course slightly, putting a ridgeline between herself and the battery's projected line of sight. The terrain helped. Valleys and hills broke up radar returns, made her harder to track. 10 minutes out, her comms crackled. Not words, static, jamming. They knew something was in the area. Couldn't see her, but they suspected. Renata switched to backup comms, the signal cleared. Ghost, Overwatch.